Well, we are going to get started, Sheriff. Thank you so much for joining us today. So, Sheriff Mike Boudreaux, you are the current sheriff of Tulare County. You are running in the 20th Congressional District race to replace former Bakersfield Congressman Kevin McCarthy. Again, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start. Take away the politics for a moment, Sheriff. Just introduce yourself to our viewers. Who are you, and what brings you here to Bakersfield today?
Well, I really appreciate that. I was born and raised in Tulare County, but I have ties all through the Central Valley. I have family right here in Bakersfield. I have family in Clovis. All of the cities represented by the district, I'm really well connected to by family and friends. Being born in the Central Valley, and most people will resonate to the fact that if you live in Bakersfield, you know someone in Visalia. And if you know someone in Visalia, you know someone in Clovis. And so all of these cities are intertwined and connected, which makes it, you know, very promising to represent a district where you represent so many family and friends. By one reach or another, there's someone who knows someone who's connected by family or friends. And so that's the same way with me. My wife was raised in Tehachapi. My mother-in-law lives there, and we spend a great deal amount of time there. Bakersfield, my brother-in-law is a fireman here. We spend a great deal amount of time here. And then my kids compete in competitive swimming and water polo, and we travel up and down the state through the Central Valley. And so we're in Clovis, where my cousin is, and we visit quite regularly. So I'm no stranger to the Central Valley. I understand the needs of the Central Valley when it comes to public safety and the impacts of an open and unsecure border. As the sheriff, I work very closely with our agricultural community, and I understand the hardships that they go through. And then the oil industry as well here in Kern County. I mean, Kern County should be the most prosperous county in the state of California, but yet they're overregulated due to their oil. We produce 70% of California's oil and gas. Why are we so overregulated, not being able to be so prosperous? The Central Valley, with its ag and its oil and the ability to store water, should be the most prosperous and well-rounded part of the United States. And so because I have such a networking with that, I find myself with this open position feeling as if I need to be a part of change. I feel that I have a strong background and reputation and track record that would help support a good voice and representative in Congress in Washington, D.C., because I understand the needs of the community and family that live right here in District 20.
We're going to delve into each of those issues a bit more later, but what inspired your run for the 20th Congressional District? When did you start thinking about the run formally?
Well, I have to tell you, when McCarthy first decided to step down, and I respect McCarthy and all the work that he's done, and anybody that's stepped into political office, you know, it's a challenge. And when he first stepped down, there was a 5-day window. I began getting phone calls from people who I thought were going to run for office. And so I didn't get one phone call. I received multiple phone calls saying, Sheriff, this may be the best time and opportunity for you to step into a position to represent the district. And so when I began receiving phone calls from people who I have a great deal of respect for, asking me to consider running for this position, well, that began to create a thought process of maybe I can really do some effective change. Maybe there is support there that we can do some good things. And so I sat with my wife and family and my children, and it's a very difficult decision because, you know, right now I get to go to my kids' sports after school, and I can go to their practices, or if my wife or I either one have a special event, we're pretty much within driving distance of meeting each other and enjoying family time. And so that required my family to get together. So in addition to the family and as well as many of these people who I thought would be the ones to run, calling me, asking me and encouraging me to run. Sometimes politics is in timing, and I felt that this is a perfect time to step into that role.
And you have now been the Tulare Sheriff for 37 years. What do you say is your proudest accomplishment during that time? I know you've been with the department from a very young age.
Yeah, started with the sheriff's office when I was 19 years old. I've been there 37, coming up on 38 years. There's not one accomplishment that stands out, because with each step throughout my long track record and career in law enforcement, there was always something that was satisfying in the job, whether it be community interaction and doing something in the community for kids, whether it's unraveling and solving decade-long murder trial or murder case, or whether it's solving active issues with cartel and gangs in our community. We had a recent situation where multiple family members were shot and killed, and we were able to capture and identify the suspects in those cases. But this last year, we also were able to reach over 30,000 children in our community with free sports program, an after-school program, football, basketball, soccer, all for free. And so there's not one thing that stands out. I think community service, when we talk about community service, sometimes we pigeonhole that comment, but really what it is what are we doing for people that we live with in the area we live in? And so when we generated that after-school program, we reduced our juvenile crimes by over 40% because we were able to engage with our community. And one of the things we say, or I say, is that if you connect with the children, you're going to connect with the parents. And if you connect with the families, you're going to change a community. And I'm very proud of the fact that we did that, but I'm also proud of the fact that the men and women in our agency work so well with the community that we serve. We do a lot of great things. So there's not one thing that stands out over a 37, 38-year career. But I can tell you that I can almost remember every challenge. I can remember every accomplishment. I can remember the failures. I think we learn most from our failures. But I can say truly that I am so proud and blessed to be the elected sheriff of Tulare County.
Many accomplishments, many memorable moments, like you just noted, Sheriff. How does this all translate to Congress and the federal level now? What do you say your top 3 priorities are once you get elected and go to Washington, D.C.?
Well, I can tell you, and I think with the people of the United States, and most specifically to the Central Valley and District 20, this is talked about every day. It's not a subject that comes to any surprise, and that's border security. And with border security, I believe that we must secure our border. We must create a long wall and a tall wall, but a wall is not going to be the answer. The answer is going to be how do we begin working with Mexico, who quite frankly is not our enemy? How do we begin shutting down the ability for people to come into our country illegally when there's definitely a legal process? We can go into that and some of the people I've talked to and how they became legal citizens of the United States. But we need to identify and help identify who's here living in the shadows. We have good people living in the shadows, but we have many people living in the shadows that quite frankly are criminals, terrorists, people who want to hurt America, kill Americans. What's coming across that border is staggering and jeopardizing the security and safety of the people who live here. So number 1 would be our safety and security. Another element that becomes a top priority of mine is the economy and what we're spending our money on. When I first became undersheriff, the second in command of the office, the sheriff told me that we had a $2 million deficit. And he says, your responsibility is the budget. We need you to balance the budget. Well, when you take a look at things very surgically, I learned quickly that we were spending money on a lot of fat, and we needed to cut the fat. And we needed to make some hard decisions and take away some things we were spending money on, but yet still provide resources to the people we serve. And I was able to cut away that fat. And so we run a $120, $130 million budget. We were short $2 million. And during that time, I was able to cut the fat and balance the budget. So when we balance the budget, most specifically coming into our federal budget, which we're in a deficit, the American dollar is depreciating quickly. The world's economy is founded on the American dollar. We must strengthen our American dollar. And how do we do that? Well, one of those is, what are we spending our money on? Where can we cut the fat federally? If we continue to print money and continue to spend money we don't have, inflation is going to continue to skyrocket. So as a congressman going in, economy is one of my top priorities. Reducing our debt is a top priority, but most specifically, we need to start caring for the families who can't pay for milk, who can't pay for gas. I have a couple different stories I can tell you in regards to our economy. 2 of which I spoke with people in the grocery store. One was a man with 3 young daughters, and they had some food on the counter there to pay for their nightly meal, and they had some hot dogs, and they had some bread and some other things on the counter. And he asked his daughter to take the hot dogs back and to take the hot dog buns back because he couldn't afford it. And then a young mother, I talked to her most recently, she asked her young daughter to take the whole gallon of milk back and go get a half gallon. And I spoke with both of them because I wanted to know. And this was a sheriff before I even started to run for Congress. And they said, well, Sheriff, I can't pay for it. I have to have $5 to get to work tomorrow. Otherwise, I can't pay for food coming into the weekend. Well, it devastated me. It broke my heart. I think it breaks the heart of a lot of people who live in the Central Valley because we see it. Our homeless and mental health crisis is out of control. I would hate to see these young moms and these dads find themselves homeless on the streets with their children because they can't pay for food. We must start looking out for our economy. That's number two. The other thing is I paid for their groceries because I'm blessed. I'm blessed, and I think a lot of us, we are so blessed that we need to help others. But how do we do that as a nation? This is not a problem that's unique to the Central Valley or unique to California. This is happening all across the country. We have moms that aren't able to pay for food. Do you know that we have people, one of the biggest things that we need to start thinking about is we have American citizens who go hungry every night because they can't pay for food. We can't spend our money in Ukraine. We can't spend our money in other countries when we have people right here in the United States who can't pay for food. These are real life stories. And so I want to go and start cutting the fat. I want to start focusing surgically on what we're spending our money on. And I don't even want to talk about another dime going to Ukraine until we start talking about our border and securing it. We're in jeopardy. But these stories are real life. And they mean something to me because I know the people that are here. I have so many different categories. One of my, you mentioned the top three. We have to start looking out for our energy production and our agricultural community. I have a lot of great ideas when it comes to water storage and what that looks like, and I have a lot of great ideas in regards to our energy. But if we don't provide water to our agricultural partners, we're not going to be able to supply the food to the people who need it, much less them being able to pay for it. It's all synergized. It's all something that has to work together in unity. And you can't focus on one thing. You have to focus on a multiple of things because they all work together, right? And so when it comes to our water, we definitely, so someone was saying the other day, well, we're in a drought and we don't have enough water because of climate change. Well, let me tell you, I don't believe in climate change, other than the fact in Bakersfield it gets 114 degrees in the summer and 38 degrees in the winter. That part of the climate changes. But we have to start developing the idea to store water, deliver water, and make sure that we can feed people. The population is what's using the water. Our population has increased to the point that we don't have enough water for everyone who needs it. So now we have great people, great minds, much smarter than me, who are dealing with water and how to store water and deliver water. One of my ideas is an old project from 1849. There is a place called Alder. It's a Alder Reservoir project that kind of has gone off to the wayside, and environmentalists get in the way sometimes, but I think we could work uniquely with them. And it's a rock-based formation that's a natural water storage area if we put in water storage, a dam. Now people go, we cannot put in dams, and you know everyone pushes back. David Valadao worked very hard to put in dams in the Shasta area, but what I'm saying is let's combine the synergy of that. Not just put in a dam, put in a hydroelectric dam. To where when you have that water storage, we generate electricity, which is clean energy, clean electricity. That we can use that energy in the northern part of California, but yet the water storage can filter into our already existing canal system. There's also technology that allows for us to pump water back into our aquifers, restore our aquifers. Our water in the underground is depleted by 6 feet over the last few years. We need to get that built back up. And we have the technology to pump it back in. And then finally, why not a desalinization idea, desalinization plant? There's one in San Diego now. The problem is it's expensive to operate and it's expensive to build. Now, how desalinization works is when the natural hot sun hits the ocean water, it evaporates into the atmosphere and comes back down as clean, fresh water. Well, that's the idea behind a desalinization in San Diego. They have one plant, very expensive to operate, very expensive to build, but it will offset the amount of water that's needed for the LA Basin and the Central Valley. We could put one in Los Angeles and we could put one in San Francisco. Now, all these ideas are kind of out there a little bit, but if we have federal money working with our partners in the state of California, maybe, just maybe, we can start to make some impacts, but we have to do it now. We're behind the curve. It takes a long time to build a reservoir. If we started tomorrow, it won't be done for years. But I'm the guy who will go in there and fight for that. So I have a lot of different categories when it comes to foreign affairs policies. I have a lot of different ideas when it comes to, do we impeach the president for what's going on now? I have a lot of different concepts and ideas. But I will tell you that I'm an evidence-based data guy. I can't go off what the news is telling me. I want to see the evidence. So I've been in law enforcement 37 years, and I've had people make claims that aren't true. I have to have the evidence to support that. But I'm also a guy that's going to stand on his own 2 feet. I've been bullied before, and I've dealt with some of the worst people that society has to offer. They don't scare me. Washington's not going to be any different.
I know in a lot of your speeches too and interviews you use the word bully.
Yeah.
When you say bully typically, who are you referring to? Are there any politicians?
What I mean by bully, I think I'll tell you why I use that term. My wife is a school principal. And so anti-bullying is a campaign that the education system goes into. And we in the sheriff's office go on an anti-bullying campaign. And what I mean by that, and I think it's a great question, is that you have people who take advantage of others by being mean, pushing around, manipulating, and trying to get their own way, either through violence, fear, or other means. That's what I mean by bullying. So if we go into an environment in Washington, D.C. where someone's trying to be mean or push around or intimidate or manipulate, that's what I mean by bullying. I can stand up to anybody in regards to that, but I can also work with anybody. I've worked with people who don't like me. I've worked with people who disagree with me. And at the end of the day, we've often come to a negotiated balance. That's what's important in D.C. right now. You know that I have many Democrat friends where I sit around a table and we have debate. We just had a debate the other night with a group of friends, and we were pretty balanced in the room. There was an independent, 3 Republicans, and about 4 Democrats. We're all friends. We don't have the same policy agreements. We don't have the same perceptions as to the president and the administration. It's very different. But I have to tell you, we get so many things resolved in there. We have them agreeing with me at times. I have myself agreeing with them at times. Boy, we really got to get that back to Washington, D.C.
Many follow-ups to your answers on your top 3 priorities, Sheriff, but I do want to start with water. You mentioned collaboration, and you also mentioned Congressman David Valadao. How do you plan on working with Congressman Valadao, who has been pushing for a lot of water conservation efforts here in the Central Valley?
He has, and I have to partner with him and any other congressperson that's working in the House of Representatives. I would partner with anybody to bring success and value and prosperity to the Central Valley and to District 20. I get along with David very well. He's a friend of mine. I've worked with him in regards to sheriff's office issues. But as you know, I'm the president of the California State Sheriff's Association. So in that role, I find myself working with the Attorney General's office, working with the governor's office. I just got off a conference call a few days ago where I'm working directly with the governor's office on issues of retail theft. And so the idea would be is that we have to be able to, I at least would have to be able to, work with many different personalities and political opinions. David probably needs some help. He needs some help and support in regards to getting some water in this valley. And if I can support him in any way, obviously I'll do that. David's one of those who tries very hard to work on both sides of the aisle, and I respect that. He's a good man. And so to answer your question, I think it's simple that I have a track record of working with all different types of legislators, with the Assembly, with the Senate. I've worked with Vince Fong. I've worked with Devin Mathis. I've worked with Shannon Grove in the Senate. I've worked with all of these legislators pushing back against the defund the police concepts. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen and heard of. When you dial 911, you want a police officer there. I do believe that there's room for social services and the need for that, and I think we could go into that when it comes to our homeless and mental health crises, and I think that federal money needs to come in and help states across the United States support a social service system where mental health is addressed. But I also believe that we need to reinstitute mental health institutions within the state. There's people living on the street that, quite frankly, don't know what's going on around them. They need help. But I have worked with the governor's office, who's a variety of different personalities and political belief systems, Democrat and Republican alike. So in my position as sheriff, people say, well, it's not political. Oh no, the sheriff's office is a very political position, the elected sheriff. I work with 57, I'm number 58, sheriffs in the state of California where we work diligently to make sure that we're providing public safety. I can tell you that Sacramento legislators, I believe, have failed in a lot of regards. California is not a safe place. We need to start holding people accountable. And that's some part of my plan when it comes to securing the border. This is what I believe. I believe if you come across the border illegally the first time and you don't go through the legal process and we send you back because you're a criminal or because that you've done things illegally, then we catch you a second time, there needs to be a stiff penalty to that, maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years time. We can go into the human trafficking. Anybody that brings children across this border and we catch you, it needs to be a minimum of a 25-year federal offense. We need to make things serious. And children are one of my top priorities.
On immigration, I know you mentioned continuing that wall. So you mean continuing former President Trump's wall? Okay. You also mentioned there's people in the shadows that, quite frankly, could be dangerous to American citizens. So you just mentioned if you come across the border, fail the first time, you come in the second time, there should be repercussions. What about people who are, as you put it, living in the shadows? Do you support any plans to track those people down? Tell us more about it.
What I believe is there needs to be a legitimized, reasonable process for those who have come here who are living peacefully. I don't support coming here illegally. I don't. I had two different friends, let me tell you those stories, one from Honduras, one from the Philippines. Both of them said, my argument to them was, well, should we make the process easier? Both of them, unsolicited, said, Sheriff, the process is not hard. The process is lengthy, but it's not hard. I said, well, what do you mean by that? They said, look, we fill out the paperwork, we do what we're supposed to do, we follow up, we become U.S. citizens. One of them, it took 10 years. It's a long time. The other one was 7 years, not as long. Well, what I think is that money needs to go to support processing the validity of those who want to be American citizens. But you have to want to be an American citizen. And so for those who are living here in the shadows, say, for example, they came across illegally, working, thriving, raising children, and I have a thought process on the DACA program as well. They need to be identified, but we need to have enough judicial branch. We need to have enough judges that begin to process people, get them evaluated, get them vetted. If they don't meet the legal process, I'm sorry, you got to leave. If they do meet the legal process, then let's begin to push them through the system, get them a work visa, get them a green card, but validate and vet people, because we don't want dangerous, violent people living here. And that's part of my plan.
For anyone who comes in illegally, should there be a pathway to citizenship for them, Sheriff?
Well, like, let's go into DACA. Okay, so many of the DACA children, I know DACA children who have become adults. I know them. They were here 2 years old, 3 years old. They can't be held responsible for their parents bringing them here at such a young age. But what I do think is that there needs to be a pathway to citizenship for the DACA children. And how do you do that? I would argue that serving time in the military. When you come out of the military, that you would, have a pathway to citizenship, or some type of other community service like the Salvation Army, or something of public service that shows that you want to be an American and that you are an American. And then there needs to be a pathway for that. But I think that the DACA should come to an end. But for those who are here already, then we need to provide a pathway for them to become U.S. citizens. They've been here, they've lived here since they were 2 years old, and there needs to be a reasonable pathway for that. And for those who are already here, they needs to go through a judicial system. And one of the problems that we have is we don't have enough judges to evaluate all these cases. I just went down and visited Homeland Security and Border Patrol. And do you know that only 2 to 8% of those coming across the border illegally are Mexican nationals?
I remember you said, and you stated this earlier as well, right? You said, quote, don't get caught up in the narrative Mexico is the bad player.
That's right. Mexico's not the bad player, is what I said. They are not our enemy. Mexico's not our enemy. They're not sending missiles into our homeland. They're not trying to hurt and destroy us. But what we don't want is cartel. We don't want cartel that are here. We don't want people running dangerous fentanyl into our country. I would say that let's work with the Mexican government and say that, look, you know what, we'll provide industry where we can have businesses in your country and you can work with our country with a legal system in place with a wall, but allow us to come in and dismantle all the cartels. Allow us to come in and work with you, completely dismantle the cartels, get rid of human traffickers, that we would work together in partnership with countries. And with that we would have, it's going to require some infrastructure, or even some trailers where we put enough judges in place on both sides that we can begin to process people. And if you're not supposed to be here, you go back on the other side and you come back through legally. But I think that there's a partnership that can take place. And we need to completely dismantle cartels. They're working with China. China's our enemy right now. And they're bringing in dangerous amounts of fentanyl coming into our country. And they're working with the cartels to bring it in through our border. And so we need strong relationships with Mexico. And that, I truly believe that.
On the topic of partnership, in a 2019 LA Times article, you said, quote, I do not believe that local law enforcement should enforce immigration law.
I still believe that.
Okay, so you still stand by that statement, but you've also said you want to let local law enforcement interact with federal partners like ICE and Customs and Border Patrol to ensure they can find, process, and deport the most dangerous illegal immigrants.
That's right.
So, how should I phrase this? Any lawmaking in terms of immigration shouldn't come at the local level, but you do want local and federal partnerships when it comes to tax.
It used to be? Yes. Okay. So, for law enforcement, we're already drained of resources to provide public safety anyway. We have burglaries that occur every day. We have assault with the deadly weapons, domestic violence, child abuse every day. And we're responding to those calls. I don't get to pick if you're a Republican or a Democrat or a legal immigrant if I get to enforce that or provide safety to you. But how it used to be is if we would arrest somebody and they would come into our jail, we would identify you as a legal citizen or not. If you were not here legally, ICE would come into our jail and evaluate you and determine whether or not you needed to be deported or not. So here's the biggest hiccup. California created Senate Bill 54. California Senate Bill 54 no longer allows us to do that. We can no longer work with ICE. We can no longer identify the violent criminal coming into our jail system. That was a good flowing system. We didn't go out into the communities as law enforcement to identify if you're a legal resident or not. You would end up in our jail, and if you were someone in our country who was committing crimes, then we would have you report to ICE, and ICE would come into our jail and evaluate whether you come or not. Do you know that we would have anywhere between 20 and 50 in my jail alone? ICE wouldn't take them all. They would take the most dangerous. The most dangerous violent people would be deported, and then a process would begin. That's what we need to get back to. I'm not saying go out and use law enforcement to round up people, although I think that there's people here that they need to go through the legal process. But allow us in our jail system to identify those who are dangerous and violent people. Work with Immigration Customs Enforcement where they come into our jails, identify those people who need to be deported, and continue that program. SB 54 destroyed that.
So it's for people who are already in law enforcement's custody. You're not, again, just to put a fine point on it, you're not supporting that law enforcement necessarily go out and look for those quote-unquote illegal immigrants.
I don't.
Okay. And you mentioned this last week in your speech as well, but your opponent, David Giglio, he has criticized you for supporting an amnesty policy, which you denied during that speech. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Are you still for finding a middle ground?
We have to find a middle ground. Here's what David doesn't understand is SB 54, which I clearly explained to you. You know, he says that I say that I'm an amnesty, open border guy. Look at my record. Look at my track record. That's absolutely not true. I was one of the first sheriffs to come out openly against SB 54, called a racist for it. Has nothing to do with race. It has to do with identifying felons. It has to do with identifying people who are here to harm us. It has to do with people who are not living within the laws of the United States. But I also can't be the sheriff under SB 54 that goes to a call for service, and I have a woman who's been beaten half dead, and I don't enforce what I need to do to provide her safety just because she's here illegally. There's a balance that has to take place. We have millions of people that are here. What I'm trying to say is let's begin. Once we secure the border, and until we secure the border, it's an open funnel where our resources are depleted. There's no way that we can come in and round up millions of people. Now, is there a process that we can begin? Absolutely, we can begin. We can begin identifying first and foremost the criminals who come through our jail system. Now, I'm not saying we go out into the streets and round up people, but I think over the course of time there's a process. People who are here illegally, we need to make sure that they're held accountable and they go before a judicial system, and if they need to leave, they need to leave. But going out and rounding up people for the sake of rounding up people, I mean, that's almost barbaric. You have to have a solution. You have to have a problem-solving set. The first is to shut the border. The second is to let ICE work with law enforcement to identify those who are the most dangerous. And then thirdly, we need to begin identifying those in the shadows, whether they're here to hurt us or whether they're here to really want to be American citizens. But those who are identified need to be vetted, they need to be documented, and they need a judicial process that takes place.
Are you going to request more federal funds to be used to support that judicial process?
Yes.
Okay.
We need more judges. We need more people to be heard. And we have victims who are afraid to call law enforcement in fear of being deported. Can't have that. But what if we created a program where we go, you are now responsible to see this judge at the border. You need to go see the judge. And if you refuse to go see the judge, then we're going to make you go see the judge. or we'll make you leave. But first and foremost is the most dangerous, violent people that are here that need to leave. We have terrorists that are here that want to hurt Americans.
On this topic, Sheriff, I want to ask, are you comfortable with the language former President Trump has used recently that immigrants are poisoning the blood of the country? Are you comfortable with that type of rhetoric used to describe that population?
Say it again?
Immigrants are poisoning the blood of the country. Poisoning the blood is the phrase that Mr. Trump has used.
I'm not sure what he's referring to. I mean, that's a one-line comment. I'm not really sure what
he's referring to. Illegal immigrants who are in the country.
Well, there's a lot of illegal immigrants here that are causing harm. I can't speak to that.
Are you comfortable with that type of language?
I think that's strong. It's strong. I will probably use different language, but my voice would be, we have to identify the most dangerous people. We have to create a path where those here who came across illegally go through a judicial process. My concern is there's people from other countries here that want to kill us. And so if he's referring to that, that's a problem. If you come into America and you're waving every other country's flag but America's flag, then I would agree you are poisoning America. If you're coming in and you really want to be an American, then don't come into America and wave the flag of a different country. If you want to be an American, then be an American. But don't come here trying to say that you're here and you're not an American citizen, enjoying the freedoms that we have, protesting in the streets for anyone other than America. And if he's referring to that, I agree. You can't be in the streets protesting for another country. You should be here wanting to be an American.
I'm just looking for a quote that I have down because I want to make sure I say it correctly. While we're on the topic of Mr. Trump, Sheriff, I'm trying to find it. It's all in here. I just have so many notes. Oh, there we go. So you recently reposted a tweet titled, quote, "Inconvenient Facts About January 6th. You've also previously tweeted that there is only one reason why the left does not want voter ID, and that's to cheat. Prove me wrong. And back in early 2022, you said, quote, "The whole election was a fraud." That was part of your tweet from early 2022. If you're elected into Congress, Sheriff, one of the first things you and your colleagues have to do in 2025 is certify the results of the 2024 presidential election. Will you accept the results no matter what?
Listen, I'm a law and order guy. Things need to be done with law and order, data and evidence. There were shenanigans that took place. Now, I'm not saying that the election was wrong, but I am saying that your gut tells you reasonably something's wrong. We need to have voter ID. Why don't we have that? We require everyone to have a driver's license. If you want to vote, then you need to be an American citizen and show that you're an American citizen, and you need to show up and your one vote counts for one vote. I can tell you from the evidence that I've seen, being a law and order person, there better be evidence to show that it was done right. If it was done wrong, I will stand up and push up back against that. Things need to be done legal. Things need to be done right. I can tell you, I don't in my gut feel that everything was done on the up and up. Now, did he win? According to what we're being told, he won. But I can tell you, my gut tells me something was wrong. Just like with January 6th. We were told one thing, and now we're learning completely different. The evidence is clear. The evidence is clear with the videos that were coming out from January 6th, that what we were told is not in fact what took place. And now we're being told that the election was on the up and up the whole time. There's plenty of evidence out there, at least reasonable conclusion that something was just not done right. Why are we not requiring IDs to vote? No one can really answer me that. Why do we require, if you want to go fishing, that you have to have a fishing license? If you want to go hunting, you have to have a hunting license. But if you want to vote, anybody can vote. If you're not an American citizen and proven through that, through identification, you don't get to vote because you don't have a say what takes place in this country unless you're an American citizen.
On the topic of January 6th, so are you planning, once you go into Congress, are you going to push to pardon some of those who have been charged?
Well, I think that goes outside the scope of what my responsibility would be. I think that rests with the President of the United States.
So then what is your take on people who were involved in the January 6th insurrection?
I'm a law and order guy. I want to see the case. I want to see the evidence. I don't want to know. You told me. and I think you're a good reporter, don't get me wrong. But I don't want to know what the news is telling me. I want someone to present me with the facts right at the table in the chair where I sit. I've looked and evaluated evidence my entire career. I don't go off based off opinion. I don't go off news stories. I don't go off rumors or innuendos. I want to know the facts. And if you have someone that got out of line and the facts and the evidence show and prove that, well, you need to be held accountable. But if the evidence doesn't support that, we have a judicial system in place for you are innocent until proven guilty. And we have people that haven't even gone to court, held for over 2 years or however long it's been now. Where's the evidence to support it? I want to see the evidence. Now, I would be the guy that would ask for the evidence. As a congressman, I'd say, look, these people have been in jail. I want to see the evidence. What evidence do you have? And that I would demand. Now, if you show me the evidence that supports what you're saying, okay. But if the evidence isn't there, then we need to get people out of jail.
And Sheriff, you said you would not accept the results of the 2024 election no matter what. What outcome of that election would make you doubt whether a fair process was upheld in the presidential election?
Listen to me. Does it seem reasonable to you that the counting of the ballots stopped in the middle of the night? Where over several 100,000 votes the other side was behind. Stopped. The next day, all of a sudden, miraculously, several 100,000 votes put the opposition ahead. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't pass the smell test. I don't think there was enough investigation put into that. I'm not saying that I don't accept it altogether. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, show me the evidence, right? If we, in January 6th, were told one thing, but now the videos show another, and now you're telling me that this was legal, just, and upright, well, then show it to me. Let us ask questions. Why are we not asking those questions?
What outcome in the election, Sheriff, would make you want the evidence? Is it if Mr. Trump were to lose? Is it if the Democratic nominee were to become elected the next president? What outcome would make you doubt whether the election was conducted fairly?
Show me the evidence that shows it was accurate and fair.
So what outcome is that?
What do you mean by outcome? If President Trump loses, we accept that. Okay. Right? And right now, President Trump is not in office. He's running for office again. So we're somewhat beyond that, right? So don't put me into a position where I say I will never accept it. I have to accept it. He's the President of the United States right now. No. But what I have to say is that as we move forward from this point, and we've learned from our mistakes of the past, where there's question in the integrity of our elections, why are we not moving to the future by making sure that there's no question in the data that's collected with an election? We must not look to the past. We must move forward. And moving forward means, as Congress, we need to say, election laws matter. You must identify yourself as an American citizen. You must show that you legally reside here. And then you get one vote for one person. This mail-in ballot stuff is seriously in question. I think that it needs to be in-person vote. But we're not going to go with what the past is saying. Biden is sitting in the White House. Not a lot I can say to that. But what I say moving to the future, why would we, moving to the future, ever hope to recreate what we had with the last election? Let's make it fair. Let's make it balanced. Let's make sure what the future holds is that we've made change and learned from our mistakes.
Do you endorse Mr. Trump in his re-election bid?
I do.
Okay. And speaking about election integrity, right, one of your opponents, Assemblymember Vince Fong, is in the middle of an ongoing lawsuit with California Secretary of State regarding his congressional candidacy. Again, to mention David Giglio, he is one that says he should not be allowed to be on the ballot twice. Now, Assemblymember Fong says he's only running for Congress. That's the only office he's campaigning for, he's running for. Do you view him as a legitimate candidate in the CD20 race? Should he be allowed to run for Congress?
Well, it's not my choice, right?
But do you view him as a legitimate?
My choice. It's up to the judicial system. It's up to the judge. It's up to the appellate court. I know that he's going to be, the Secretary of State filed an appeal intent. We'll see what that outcome holds. I mean, if a judge in the appellate court says he can run, then he can run. There was a bit of a mindset change, I guess, on his behalf, but I can't speak on behalf of Mr. Fong. He's making a decision for him and his campaign, and the judicial system, the justice system will decide his fate, whatever that may be, and we'll all accept whatever that ruling is. It's not for me, much like the other questions that we talked about, it's not for me to decide. That's for the judges to decide.
And on the topic of Assemblymember Fong, I'm curious, if he is to remain in the race, do you view him as one of your top opponents? Who do you view as your top opponent?
Vince Fong. Yeah, Vince is I actually consider Vince a friend of mine. I think he's a good man. I think his intentions and heart is good. But I'm in it to win this race. And I think it'll be a gentleman's race. I have nothing bad to say about any people, any opponents in this race. I hope that it stays a gentleman's race. And the facts will pan out by the voters at the end of the day. And I think that you have to come in with a very reasonable set of courtesy to everybody. We come in and we give our viewpoints as to our positions, and then we give our experience levels. I don't know that my position on much of the conservative positions is any different than one of the other candidates, but what I can tell you is that I have far more depth and experience, real life experiences, living in the streets, dealing with our mental health care issues, dealing with our homelessness. I have firsthand dealt with human trafficking and our victims. I have dealt personally with the open border crisis because it impacts our Central Valley, because I've investigated it for years. And I'm also the one that's worked with every part of California government, with the legislators as well as the Attorney General's office and the Governor's office. So I don't know that our viewpoints are any different, but I can tell you that I have far more experience and depth than many of the other candidates, in my opinion.
Tell me your reaction to Giglio maintaining that you are McCarthy's second choice.
McCarthy didn't endorse me, right? McCarthy endorsed Vince Fong. I'm running against Vince Fong. If that were true, wouldn't you argue that I would be stepping off into silence? That's not happening. David doesn't know me. He's not from the Central Valley. I think that he is I think David, wants the job. I think he's doing what he can to get the job. I don't know him personally. He doesn't know me. But if he were to take a look at my track record, he would quickly find that his comments are actually not valid points.
And David, Mr. Giglio he describes himself as an America First Republican. One of your endorsements comes from former U.S. Ambassador and Acting Director of National Intelligence, Rick Grinnell. He calls you a, quote, America First patriot. Again, very similar description as to how David Giglio described himself. Do you agree with that description of you, America First patriot? And how do you compare yourself to your opponent, who again is called a similar label, yet often described as a far-right MAGA candidate in the race?
How about we look at track records? Let's take a look at what David has done. I always have the most difficult time pronouncing his name, but let's take a look at his experience level and what he's done. What have you done for the Central Valley? Are you coming in and wanting the position and not really fully understanding the people who live here? The difference is I know family members here, and we've been born and raised here. I know the Central Valley and the impacts of what it means to our water and our agriculture and our oil and over-regulation of such. You can regurgitate a lot of bullet points from whatever news station that you want, but do you have solutions? Have you lived it? Have you talked to the people? Have you been here over the last 40 years working with our community, or are you not? What is your position and solution and input on this? I believe in America. I believe in America first. I am a patriot in the sense that I believe in America. I think that America should take top priority. For example, when we're talking about Ukraine and more money going to Ukraine, I don't believe in that. Why are we not securing our border and taking care of our veterans? Why do we have people in this country who can't even eat at night? We have a mental health crisis. I believe America should be focused on, and the money should be spent on America, but there's a lot of bigger issues when it comes to foreign policy and foreign security that we must work with different countries to assure world peace. Right now, the world is, quite frankly, up in arms because there's not a lot of that going on and there's a lot of turmoil, but we must, if you were to categorize me, we must focus on the American people first.
I will let you touch on foreign policy a bit more, but on the topic of endorsements, we've heard from sources that Senator Shannon Grove may be endorsing you. Is that true?
It'd be great.
Have you been in touch with her about your campaign?
Shannon Grove's a friend of mine, and she's a good person, works hard. I'll leave the endorsement up to the decision of Shannon Grove. I can tell you that she is a wonderful person. She believes in the people who live here. Yeah, if you could talk her into endorsing me, that would be a great thing.
Nothing confirmed yet?
No.
Okay. Alrighty. And one quick question on Ukraine for me. Where do you stand with funding for Israel, Sheriff?
Must support Israel.
Okay.
I'm a big believer. Israel is one of our strongest, most reliable allies. They have and it's important that we look at track record. Israel has supported the United States with a track record that's proven that. We must support Israel. When Hamas came in and slaughtered families, I mean, it looked like a scene out of Red Dawn, where they came in and just slaughtered and killed people. Israel must be able to defend its homeland. Israel must be able to remove Hamas to secure its safety and security. We as America should stand by our allies. We must support Israel.
On the topic of Ukraine, you mentioned initially you were all for sending over financial support.
Yeah.
But last week in that speech, you did note President Zelensky had purchased 2 luxury yachts, which the AP has found to be untrue.
It came out as, so when I read that, that was the news of the day, right? You remember earlier when I said we can't always listen to the news? So when I was listening to the news, that was the hot topic of the day. And as I read it, evidently it came out later as propaganda. And it's disappointing when we rely on the news so much for information and we learn that it's not true. But yet, I still believe that there's questions into how much we're supporting Ukraine. I mean, we're sending millions upon millions of dollars to Ukraine, and I would say that we need to see a ledger of accountability. Where's that money going? And and the other would be is that where is the money set aside to help support our border? I don't want to speak about Ukraine anymore until we secure our border. I don't think one more dime should go to Ukraine until we secure our border.
And I know the Second Amendment is also of big importance to you. I mean, I know you're pushing back against SB 2 right now, so is our Sheriff, Donna Youngblood. Let's talk more about how Tulare is handling concealed carry weapons and ghost guns, and again, how that's going to transition to the federal level. Because nationwide, we see mass shootings, we see school shootings, so not everyone is quite on board with concealed carry and ghost guns
Well,
across
I think
the
you have to
nation.
look at the data. So you're entwining 2 different issues. Ghost guns have nothing to do with concealed carry weapon. Ghost gun is a very illegal thing. Ghost gun has nothing to do with law-abiding citizens exercising their Second Amendment right. I have 8,000 to 10,000 concealed carry permits issued in my county. Over the last 30 years, we've had zero incidents where someone who's a law-abiding citizen exercising their Second Amendment right has committed a school shooting, committed any type of violent crime, committed a robbery, other than maybe defending themselves, but that's not a crime.
We're talking Tulare County.
Tulare County. We'll take a look at the state. You give me the numbers. Go look them up. You're going to find, I work with the sheriffs all across this state. We have a very, very low, if to zero, incidents of law-abiding citizens exercising their Second Amendment right. You know where we have issues? Criminals and gang members who use guns. They're not supposed to have guns. They're not held accountable in court. If you're a gang member using a gun, there needs to be an enhancement. If you're a cartel or a drug trafficking operation who is bringing guns of untold amounts across our open border, you need to be held accountable. If we catch you bringing guns into this country, then there needs to be a federal prison sentence. If you are using guns in this state and you commit a crime, there needs to be enhancement in state prison. If you steal a gun, no matter the value, you need to go to prison. But for a law-abiding American citizen, show me the data. I would wait to see her because it looks as you've done some great research and I appreciate it, but show me the data. Have you looked up the data as to law-abiding citizens who have committed crimes in this state? Where is the data that shows that we need to have an increased level of training? We're already doing 8 hours of training, now we have to do 16 hours. Where's the data that shows that you have to be 21 years of age instead of 18 years of age to even buy a gun? I don't understand. And then tell me, if you have a law-abiding citizen, why would you restrict them from carrying a gun to defend themselves in areas where mass shootings do in fact take place? Schools, parks, malls. If you have someone coming in that's committing a crime probably because of a mental health issue, why would you not want someone who's a law-abiding citizen to be able to stop the ongoing slaughter that they could entail in that situation? People who use gun and crimes need to be held accountable, and that message needs to be very clear. But a law-abiding citizen is not your issue. Concealed weapon carry permit holders are not your issue. The issue is the criminal. The criminals who are using guns to commit these acts. We have a mental health crisis in this country and it has failed us. We need to start supporting and sending money to the idea that more social services through health and safety and service, HHSA, or Health and Human Services, to where we can identify people with mental health conditions, where we can intervene early. But it's not your American law-abiding citizens that's committing these acts of violence.
And how are you hoping Governor Newsom better handles crime? I believe in the past you've said he's too soft on crime.
I'll tell you he's on crime. So when we had Proposition 47 and 57 take place, it was non-serious, non-violent, non-sexual offenders were released from jail. Well, I have to tell you that if you have someone committing these types of crimes, the likelihood of them committing another crime is very high. And when we're releasing people from jail, not holding them accountable, what message does that send? Now take a look at our retail theft and what's happening across this state. We have people dressing up all in the same clothing, black clothing, so you can't identify who they are, wearing masks, and they're not wearing masks because it's COVID. They're trying to keep from being identified in mass looting across the state. And they're not being held accountable. Look at our juvenile justice system that's failing us. We're not holding teenagers accountable for crimes that are committed in this state. We've completely lost the idea that if you're a juvenile committing a crime, you need to be punished. And the same be true with criminals up and down this state. They're being released in mass numbers under Proposition 47 and mass numbers during COVID. All these people released from state prison back into society just yet to reoffend. And we're showing that the recidivism rate based on those is in fact increasing. We have an increase in crime in this state because we're not holding people accountable, and that is soft on crime.
Harsher legal repercussions for these folks. Does that apply to homeless individuals as well? Because sometimes...
No.
Okay. How do we handle the homeless?
So let me tell you this. I have people who are homeless with mental health crises in my jail. And I went to the governor and I spoke to the governor. I sat right across the table from him. And I said, Governor, we have people in my jail that should not be in my jail. And these are the same comments from sheriffs all across the state. I said, we have a failed mental health issue in our state. We have a failed mental health program in our state. Our homeless issue is directly connected to drug addicted behaviors. Not all of them. And there's some people that have fallen on hard times. I would hope that we would have a state system that helps those people who have fallen on hard times. And I would say use my taxpayer money for that. Get people off the street and help them get back on their feet. But I can tell you that as a young deputy, if I arrested you for being under the influence of methamphetamine and you had a drug addictive behavior, you would come into my jail. And you would go through what's called DTs, detoxification. It's a very violent experience. You shake, you sweat profusely, sometimes you use the restroom on yourself. But while you're in my jail, you're overseen by custodial staff. You have medical staff there evaluating your progress. You have mental health staff there. We clean you up. And in about 3 days, 2 days, depending, I've seen people sit up on their feet or sit up on their chair, take a deep breath and go, I think I'm okay now. Because they went through that hard detoxification in their system. Then while you went to court, many times you would be sentenced to 30 days, 60 days, 180 days. But while you're in my jail, you're being fed, you're being hydrated, you're receiving services. You're receiving mental health services, and you're receiving medical care, and you're receiving programs. In my jail, we have 28 different rehabilitation programs in my jail. Much of those numbers are drastically reduced because Proposition 47 releases people from our jail. But while you were there, at the end of a month, 6 months, you would come out with a fighting chance. We don't do that anymore. You come in using methamphetamine. You stay 4 to 6 hours until you're sober enough to leave. We release you back into the street. There is a direct correlation between decriminalizing the use of drugs in our homeless population. Our mental health crisis is a direct relation to that. What I would want to do is generate federal funding that allows for post-release care. Meaning once you're released from my jail, or once you're released from any type of incarceration environment all across the nation, that there's enough federal funding sources that provides mental health counseling, social services, the ability to follow up care. Right now, what do we have? We don't have much. Families are frustrated. When someone's addicted to drugs, they're frustrated. They come back into the home and cause violence or end up stealing from their own home. I've received many phone calls from families that go, Sheriff, you gotta arrest him. Well, we can, but because of state law, they can't stay very long. And so I even went to Shannon Grove and Assemblyman Mathis and others to say, hey, why can't we amend Proposition 47? Can't we amend it to say, make drug use a criminal offense? Come in and be demanded to go through rehabilitation. at the end of a year's time, once you receive post-care, meaning after release care, because as a sheriff, once you're released from the jail, I have no more control over what happens with you. But why can't we have federal funding and or state funding that's surgically focused on caring for people when they're released? And at the end of that year time, when you've come through that really difficult time of rehabilitation, erase everything, right? It no longer exists. Now you're in a program where you're learning job skills. Now you're in a program where you can come out of that hardship of drug addictive behavior. Because if you've ever talked to anybody, and I have, talked to people who have been addicted to drugs and they just can't get off, it's a very demanding thing. I've had people 30 years later, Sheriff, you don't remember me, but you saved my life when you arrested me. What do you mean? I went into your jail and I got programs and I came out clean on the other side. Had you not arrested me, I'd be dead today. You know how many times I've been told that? We have to start looking at caring for people after the release. If we can do that, I guarantee we will drastically reduce our homeless problems and our mental health issues. We do need to spend some money in the state, and that's not my responsibility, but we need to reinstitute mental health institutions. There are people living in the streets, they have no idea what's happening with them. The brain has completely gotten to a point, there's no medication or counseling that's going to fix it.
Support them start to finish.
That's right. But if we can go from the beginning of law enforcement contact, and then you make your way from law enforcement contact to the judicial process, to required rehabilitation, to health programs, to job training, and then when you're released, you continue the job training, you continue the counseling, you continue the mental health care. Boy, I gotta tell you, that seems like a system that would work.
I want to talk about climate change. Earlier you said you don't really believe in climate change other than the fact that temperatures vary pretty extremely. When it comes to oil and energy, and like you said, Kern County should be one of the most prosperous counties in the nation, right, with the oil and agriculture we have going on. You raised the question, is green energy the future? You also noted solar and wind, but you also said we can't get rid of oil completely. To do that, how do we find that right balance? It seems like everyone's struggling to find that balance of how do we transition?
I think you're spot on, but I think there's a synergy that can take place between them all. I think that wind has some value. I think that solar has some value, but you can't do either one without oil and coal. You can't keep our economy flowing up and down the state of California without diesel. But I would incorporate the idea of nuclear. You know that France has solar and wind. And they provide about 70% of their overall energy there, but not through solar and wind. They have a nuclear plant. Even environmentalists back in Governor Brown's day, now today, are leaning to the fact that nuclear is one of the cleanest and most green energies that we have. We're getting ready to shut down Diablo Canyon's nuclear power plant. That produces a wide range of energy up and down the state of California. And now, are we relying on solar and wind? Do you know that with solar, you have to go in and remove every animal that's there, every turtle? One of the largest solar plants here in California. They removed all the turtles and they put them in a zoo. Do you know that all those turtles died? Do you know that the wind machines that generate the energy require oil? You have to have oil to lubricate and run those systems. Even to build the blades, you have to have oil. Do you know that they kill millions of bats every year? They kill eagles and those endangered species that fly. They kill them. They kill birds. We killed turtles, we killed birds. Where's the balance? If you're an environmentalist, are you so focused on climate change that you're destroying the environment? We have to have a synergy. If we could all, I know this sounds like world peace, but if we could all work together with the idea that we definitely need oil, we can never get rid of it. Our economy relies on the fact that we have to have oil to transport and move. Do you know that the idea behind an electric vehicle and a battery inside a rig to move up and down the state of California is so heavy? It's so heavy that you're not able to carry mass loads for any long periods of time as compared to diesel, which is cheap and efficient, and you're able to go up and down the state of California with relative ease. If we could self-sustain within the United States, which we've proven through Donald Trump that we can, we were selling oil to other countries and making money. We can do that here. One of the first things Joe Biden did was shut down the pipeline. We need oil. We can't operate without oil. But I think there is some benefit to some degree of solar energy that provides energy. I think there's some degree of wind, but you can't rely on wind and sun. If the wind's not blowing, you're not generating energy, right? You have to have wind to generate that energy. You have to have the sun. Do you know that solar panels kill birds every year from the heat that's generated off the solar? So where's the balance? Well, where the balance is that we can come up with new and innovative ideas. I think nuclear is one of them. I think we should have 2 or 3 nuclear plants in California. I think that it's proven that it's efficient and clean. But I also think the idea earlier of a hydroelectric plant. There's new and innovative ways of creating clean energy, but we'll never get rid of diesel. We will never get rid of gas and oil. It's unreasonable to think that we would be in a utopia of electric power, because you can't generate electric without the idea that oil is being used.
When it comes to your handling of COVID, I know back in 2020,
Yep.
you, alongside the Fresno and Merced sheriffs, among many others, said you would not be enforcing the stay-at-home mandates because they're mandates, not laws, not legal requirements. You also faced a lawsuit for your handling of COVID-19 in county jails. And recently, again, on the topic of mandates, you said, mandates are not laws. I will not enforce mandates. Remember, the Supreme Court ruled mandates unconstitutional. Don't let anyone fool you into that again. So,
That's right.
again, at the federal level, I know sometimes it's up to local government, state governments. How do you handle another potential COVID outbreak or potential medical outbreaks like that? I know you don't support vaccination requirements, again, stay-at-home requirements. So at the federal level, again, as a congressman, what can we expect to see from you?
Well, what you can expect to see from me is standing up for people's constitutional rights and freedoms. I can tell you that the lawsuit that you mentioned, you didn't mention we won that lawsuit. So that's important. Because we did do the right thing in our jail system. Nobody's reporting the fact we won that lawsuit. We did do the right thing. The other is that for me, I believe in the Constitution and your freedoms. It's not for me as a law enforcement officer to tell you whether to take a vaccination or to wear a mask. That is your medical freedom. That is your choice. We've learned, in fact, that the masks had little to no value unless you wore the P95 mask. And I'll tell you where I first recognized it. I'll tell you the first, for me and my family, we did the same. 30 days we locked down and we were wearing the masks. But I remember walking to the grocery store one time and there was a man outside smoking a cigarette, and that cigarette smoke went right into me, right in where I could smell it, right through my mask. Well, the particles of COVID are far smaller than cigarette smoke. So what was the mask really doing? So after we get past the first 30 days, we're beginning to realize that things just aren't adding up and not sounding reasonable. And then when you start shutting down churches, I put out another tweet you don't mention. I say, for all of you who want to go to church this Sunday, enjoy your First Amendment.
Yeah, yes, you did.
Because we cannot have our government telling us that we can't exercise our rights. The First Amendment's equally as important as the Second, the Third, the Fourth. Me as the sheriff, I felt that I needed to be the leader who stood up for the people who wanted to exercise their own freedoms. I have criminals to catch. I have people committing egregious crimes. Not wearing a mask does not fall within the top 10.
And 2 parts to this last question. The first, if you were in Congress now, would you be supporting opening a Biden impeachment inquiry? And 2, do you believe Mr. Trump is being unfairly targeted in his multiple cases that are ongoing right now?
Yes to both. I'm a law and order candidate. I have a lot of good ideas with energy, the Central Valley, water, and our ag community. I have some good ideas when it comes to energy production. I have some good ideas when it comes to safety and security of our border. But at the end of the day, I'm a law and order guy who believes in evidence and facts. Right now, in law enforcement, we have what's called reasonable suspicion. Right now, we have enough reasonable suspicion to say something's not right here. I'm not saying Biden's guilty. I am saying that it needs to be investigated, and Congress needs to call for an impeachment hearing, hear the evidence. If the evidence doesn't support it, then no, we can't impeach him. But if the evidence is there, which clearly it deems to be, then we as Congress and the American people need to be able to evaluate that. And if in fact the evidence shows that there is wrongdoing, then we as a responsible House of Representatives needs to vote to impeach. I also believe that with President Trump, and follow up to your second question, has been unjustly targeted. He's going through some of the most egregious claims that over and over again have been shown to be false. You have people that are making criminal allegations that are going outside their scope of jurisdiction, which quite frankly shouldn't be done. And I think that he is unjustly targeted. And so yes to both questions.
Sheriff, that's it for me. Is there anything else regarding your campaign and your candidacy you want to address? Anything I missed?
I just want people to understand that I believe in the American people, I believe in the Central Valley, and my focus will be on District 20. I believe that I am the strongest candidate for the position with 38 years of experience here in the Central Valley dealing with all different types of issues, from public safety to unsecure borders, to our energy issues, and as well as our agricultural partners that need support. We need to provide food and water to the people who live here. I think that we can do that if we begin working together, if we have someone who can stand up against those who push back. I'm a very strong-willed guy, and I believe that I am the candidate to take this seat and to represent District 20 in the best way that I possibly can for the American people, but most specifically for the people of District